right. Well, welcome to today's forum. My name is Russell Matthews. I work with City Bible Forum. Thank you for being here today. Today's discussion and what we do at the forum, if it might be your first time coming along, is that we have just a discussion on a specific topic, and then with that, you're able to engage with us in regards to, you can send us SMS questions, maybe based on the topic today, or maybe something that from the conversation and the questions that we're asking of our panelists today. And so we encourage you, we'll have a number up on the screen, hopefully here in a moment, and have that available to you to be able to send up your SMS questions. Well, today's topic is Hollywood's take on God's script. So looking at the intersection of Hollywood or film and the Bible. And mainly comes from, we've been looking at and analyzing over the last few weeks and months, actually, the whole idea of the Bible being depicted in film. And on our blogs at City Bible Forum, we found that some of the biggest interest that there seems to be is in film, in particular, especially with the movie Noah that came out recently. So today we have our panelists here today, the industry professionals, as they would be called. And so thank you so much for being here today, guys. And I want to welcome to our panel, we have here to my left is Mark Hadley. Mark has been a journalist for about 20 years and been on different prominent radio and television and web productions with ABC, the BBC, and just recently the PBS. PBS, which I'm sure is huge for you all here. And then, but also he's been reviewing over the past 10 years, reviewing film, television programs, and also children's books, and but also so he has kind of an international and also a national kind of focus. So thanks for being here today, Mark. Laura Bennett. So Laura, this is great, a good opportunity to meet Laura for the first time here today. Laura's with Hope 103.2 as a host of The Switch and also nights on Sydney's 103.2. Also does reviews across Breakfast and also the Fresh programs, and has also introduced a new blog, definitely worth looking up, called The Connect Press. And so finding more of the content that kind of goes behind kind of looking at and analyzing film. And then we have Adrian Drayton. Adrian has been in the entertainment journalism kind of industry for over 17 years and works as a communications and marketing manager for the Uniting Church in Australia, but also as the founder of Real Dialogue, which really looking at faith and film and kind of where the two intersect. And so thank you so much for being here today. Yeah, thanks. And thank you for being here, all the audience, as far as your willingness to come along and kind of look at this. Well, from the Ten Commandments to Noah, from Cecil B. DeMille all the way to Quentin Tarantino, we're able to see that the Bible has made its presence known on film. We see some of the biggest films in history. Passion of the Christ, still considered one of the biggest films as far as being at $610 million worldwide. And also Noah just recently did $350 million worldwide. You can correct me if I'm doing any of these numbers wrong or anything.
Sounds good so far.
What's that?
Just check that
database.
Sounds good so far, great. We recently did a screening here at the City Bible Forum for the movie The Son of God. And at that, we had the editor of Empire magazine, Dave Brown, there. And Dave made mention, he said, you know what, I'm really surprised that there aren't more films made based on the Bible. But he said, I can understand. He said, any script writer would be doomed from the beginning because he would never make anyone, or he or she would not make anyone happy when it came to taking on the Bible because of being such a beloved text. So we're going to start there because I think this is really kind of where we're at, especially with the Noah film. Noah really brought out a lot of passionate opinions on both sides as far as looking at all those, a flood of opinions. Sorry. I'm sorry. There you go. They came 2 by 2. Yeah. But so why were people so quick to judge? And maybe was it worthwhile? Maybe I'll start with you, Laura. Why were people so quick to judge it? But also, was there any value to it at all? I mean, what is your opinion?
I think people were probably quick to judge because it's a text that is very near to people. It's a story that's very near to people, and that obviously, if you're familiar with the story, if you've ever read it, you've already come to your own opinions, you've got your own assumptions about who Noah was, what he believed about God, what the intention was of the sort of ark flood story. So when you see someone represent that on screen, much like when any novelist writes a novel and sees that adapted onto screen, there's always a risk that you are going to mess with people's own interpretation interpretation and an own belief about what that story symbolically represents and the details that need to be given attention to. So I think right from the get-go, of course it's going to have people coming back on it because their personal reading of the text wasn't what they actually saw up on screen. But whether or not I think there was value to it, absolutely, because I think it's a story that is ingrained in our history. Whether you come from a Christian belief or a secular kind of mindset, everybody's heard something about Noah. Everybody's heard this idea of the flood. So it's something that it's worthwhile looking at because it's part of the fabric of culture. It's part of the sort of pop culture references that we see come about. So I think to see it put on screen, there's great relevance for sort of every viewer. Right. But then for the Christian viewer, it's also really cool to see something that you do hold dear actually given attention to and sort of explored. I think it gives value to something that people feel a personal importance to. So great. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you should say that everybody has a pop culture sort of reference to Noah, because let's say most of us grew up somewhere along the line. There was a ship with a whole pair of animals. You know, you can put something in. Right. Maybe you didn't have to.
I put it around my children's bedroom, and then all of a sudden I realized it was
Yeah, you don't have to be a Christian to actually have those toys. In fact, you know, they're just throughout, and most people don't understand the reference to that. Or more importantly, most people who see the Noah story actually see a happy association. Oh, there's an ark and there's these fluffy animals and that sort of stuff. So
Sunday school references.
Yeah, Sunday school. Yeah. But for even if you take out the Sunday school side, from our perspective, from a Christian perspective, I'll put my hand up here, I'm a Christian. From a Christian perspective, we know the back end of that story. To the secular society, it was an absolute shock that that there was so much judgment and doom and destruction, and there was going to be tension.
Rock
and
monsters.
Yeah, exactly, the rock monsters.
The rock monsters,
But all this
We'll
stuff,
talk about that,
all this stuff is actually enlightening. And yet we're working from, as a Christian perspective, the Christian culture is working from the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. They're not having anything revealed. They're trying to watch and see what has actually been left out. Right. And I actually think Christianity has more in common with Islam at that point. Oh. Okay, because you see, if a film comes out and it contains anything associated with the Islamic faith, there is an absolute taboo associated with it to begin with. That's the starting point, because Muhammad's not allowed to be represented in any way. It's strictly against the Quran. Okay, so you can't do that. And strangely, Christianity reacts the same way when a film comes along, because it's sitting there going, it's not codified. You're not going to find in the Bible, don't do that somewhere. But what you actually have within Christian cultures is this idea of this is such a complete work. It's not just a beloved text. From a Christian point of view, the Bible is such a beloved work, complete work, that to actually do something other than the Bible or a printed version seems to be uncomfortable, heretical.
And also from a purely marketing point of view, a filmmaker like Darren Aronofsky, who made the film, had a huge roster of films that he's made. He would be wanting to make this story accessible for a Christian and non-Christian audience. So we've all, as Christian, I'm also a Christian as well, we've grown up with the story in Sunday school, and we've done all the colouring in, and it's a very kind of cut and dried sort of story. But in marketing terms, Hollywood really just wants to make money. They want to get this sort of stuff out. They want to get it to the widest audience possible. And in terms of an opportunity to reinterpret the story, there it is. Like, you've got the whole pre-diluvian universe that's been created. So he's come up with a whole new universe, and it has a bit of a sort of environmental bent to it. And instantly you've got a story that actually speaks directly into today, because we're all worried about sort of global warming and all that sort of stuff. So it's a reinterpretation of the story into today's market, if you like, using that story as the template. And I even noticed in the film, they don't use the word God. No. They use creator. Yeah. So they wanted to be kind of level it out totally, so that it appealed to a huge market base and audience. So yeah, purely from even a marketing point of view, to reinterpret that sort of story is clever, because not only might it get people to go back to the source, it's a clever reinterpretation of the story.
It's clever, but sorry, man, I know you've got to. Don't you think, though, that just shows how completely they misunderstand the market? Because if they thought that using the word creator was somehow going to expand them into a Hindu market or an Islamic market or even a Jewish market, they have just misunderstood even those religions. I feel like half of what's happening is feeling around in the dark. We don't understand what we think Hollywood should be doing for us, and they don't understand how they're going to target this market. It's really early days. People are crashing into each other.
Yeah, it's a bit scattergun. Since the Passion 10 years ago, I think they've been trying to find...
Bottle lightning again, yeah.
Bottle lightning.
That's
try
actually
and
one of the
get
things
it.
I'd like to bring up.
Yeah.
Is, okay, you had the Passion that, $610 million worldwide, right? So why did that, that was, and that one is a direct story from the Bible. So why was it that one actually made it, and why did this one Noah? Just so you know, you are still, please send in your questions. If you disagree with any of these folks, not me, but if you disagree with any of them, please do send in your questions.
I wonder if the Passion was made today, if it would be as successful.
Yeah, it's something to be said for being first off the mark.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think because it was the first and it was doing an original idea, like, yes, there's been heaps of movies that talk about the Bible way back, but it was the first of the next generation to approach something from a biblical text. Obviously, it had Mel Gibson behind it, so you're smiling at me like
only because
have I revealed my age or something?
No, it was the next generation reference. It made me think of Star Trek. I just thought, yeah, this is very much like Picard coming on for Jesus instead.
Totally. I like your thinking. But because it did have such a caliber of talent and support behind it. At that time, Mel Gibson's reputation was such that people thought if he's making it, if he's involved, there's got to be something credible and interesting to watch in this. And I think there was a lot of
Despite
factors.
his slightly wacky personal life.
Yes, exactly. Let's just put that aside. But I think there was a lot of factors that went into that. Like it had the great production value. It worked the biblical text quite well in that it stayed true to the original language. Unlike some of the more recent series, Jesus spoke his original language. He wasn't English or American or, it kind of brought an authenticity to it and had a really an interesting artistic interpretation too, like the way Satan was depicted. All of the factors I think that make for a great movie, it was able to do them in quite a well done way. So I think,
lest we forget, there was the same Christian backlash to that film. It was just we were so stunned by the idea that it could even exist that people were going, why not? Let's get groups together. Because you pick up the language. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty certain that was done in Latin. And was it? No,
Aramaic.
I thought it was supposed to be done in. Oh, okay. What I'm trying to work out is that the point there was a debate about the language as to whether or not. Okay, so it was done in Aramaic, whether or not Koine Greek or whatever it was the most appropriate language at the time. So you had all. This is what the Christian community tends to do. There's something rather than notice that somebody has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to basically put a film up about their key central story. They sit there going, isn't it supposed to be Koine Greek? I thought. I can't see why that should be Aramaic. Why is that phrase? Where's the Hebrew?
And let's face it, the best way to get a story across is via film. Like if you've got $60 million to spend and you want to tell a story, it's the best way to tell a story. It's really culturally, it's kind of the touchstone. Filmmaking is where people go to watch stories. So.
And not that I want to stay on the Passion for way too long, because if you haven't seen it, it's the story pretty much of the latter part of Jesus' ministry and everything.
I would only say just don't. It's not one of those films to eat your dinner in front of.
No, that's sure. But that's my point.
No.
It was MA-15. Okay, so, and actually if you look at the majority of the Bible, of so many of the stories, it would be really categorized as MA-15, but yet really, why was it that one worked? It's still considered the highest grossing film of that rating. So that's interesting too, as far as how is it that you can put forward films like that, but yet still stay within the context of it?
The Bible miniseries when it came out on DVD, was MA-15. I think a lot of the stories in the Bible are MA-15, particularly Old Testament ones.
And in fact, actually, the more literal, I think this is the key. Look, I'm a scriptwriter, so the very first thing I do before I write any script is I ask myself, who am I writing for? Because I don't write for myself, I write to maximize an audience. So when I'm writing a script, I basically have to say, look, where is my audience and where do I want to take them? And so the Christian audience is an audience of literalists, generally speaking. Okay, so if you want to touch their sacred work, and I might say the same thing about the Islamic faith, less so about the Buddhist faith, but if you want to say something about the Christian community, if you want to touch their sacred writings, you are going to appeal to that audience the closer you come to literal. Okay, so the close, because there will be less to object to. They will be arguing about the edges. If you take the grand interpretations like Noah, then you start to get the areas where the community itself is going to reject on a theological basis. On that basis alone, they're going to put up a barrier between them actually.
So, what about Evan Almighty?
Totally literal.
Straight
Totally
through there.
literal.
Bruce Almighty, Evan Almighty.
No. I actually think you've hit something here, because that was not, that was almost so to the side that it could actually say some interesting things about God without actually tripping the radar of literalism. You know what I'm saying? So there's no Evan Almighty story in the Bible, and yet strangely, you've got good moments where the interaction between God, and his chosen prophet is actually interesting.
It's a reinterpretation of the Noah story.
Yeah.
But it never names or class itself as a film that's trying to do that. I think it's probably where it finds a bit of a safety net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. You guys have definitely caused quite a few people to send in some questions, so I hope you don't mind. We're just going to jump into it.
Yeah,
Just
that's
talking about
fine.
the community.
Don't ask that one.
You're not supposed to look. Okay, so going at the community path and kind of looking at, are there two different ones? What difference do we see between Bible movies made by Hollywood and those made by maybe the Christian community or?
Oh, gee.
Perfect example.
Okay.
Sherwood Baptist in the US. They have a huge following with films like Courageous and Fireproof and
Mom's Night Out.
Mum's Night Out recently this year. And in the US, there's a captive audience for those films. Like the faith-based audience in the US is huge. And I think in some ways, there's this line that Hollywood needs, they're independent filmmakers, but there's this line that Hollywood needs to try and bridge where there are some filmmakers who are doing a really good job at telling stories to Christians, and then there's mainstream movies that are not doing so well. And so there's this really funny line where I know Sony and 20th Century Fox actually set up faith-based production arms after the Passion of the Christ, hoping to kind of get the lightning in a bottle thing happening again, but they quickly kind of shut down because the most successful one for Sony was Soul Surfer, and it just made a little bit more than it cost to make the film, and that was the Bethany Hamilton story. So they want to make money, but with Sherwood Baptist, doesn't cost them much to make the films, and they can then go on to make more films because people love them. Like particularly Fireproof was a huge film in the US, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's got a little bit of an undercooked script.
Sorry, it's about a firefighter.
But it's all, and it has amateur actors in it, but people really loved it. So
the question is why, and why did they love it? Why do you?
I think it's because it's a film about marriage and the relationship of marriage and sort of the tension that there can be in that. And I think that's because culture identifies with that. Everybody in a marriage scenario, whether that is a formal marriage or just a partnership, there's a dynamic there that everybody's trying to navigate. Everybody's trying to work out, how does this union affect my everyday life, and what happens if something goes wrong in that? And so it was a film that was able to talk about something that was taken, right to the home of where people's lives are at. But then it kind of, because the message connects, people sometimes are sort of soft to the fact that the movie as a movie is perhaps weak in script or wherever it might be. They let that slide because it's a message that actually resonates.
Right.
And that's probably the distinction between your Christians making Christian films and Hollywood taking on Bible, is because the Christian filmmakers and producers, I think they probably have an intention where they're very message-minded, and depending what their focus is, with the movie, whether they're wanting it to be evangelical in terms of, sort of promoting the Christian faith, or whether they're wanting it to entertain, or what their intention is with it, that's kind of where the confusion comes. Whereas with a Hollywood filmmaker, as you said, they're more about trying to tell a great story, make a great movie, make money, and that's kind of where they sit. So I think, the Christian ones, there's a bit of confusion there for them.
Right.
We actually have a really unflattering term for the type of American Christian film you're talking about. Okay. It's
No,
called...
this is for me.
No, it still works in the Australian market.
Right.
Basically, we call it ghetto marketing. Okay, because basically you've got a sealed community which has a particular type of interest which you're appealing to. Now, the reason why it works in America is because that ghetto is huge. You know, so you can take something that you've identified, and I think it's true, the fact that the motives of the Christian producer are fundamentally different to the motives of the mainstream secular producer. So whereas the mainstream secular producer or scriptwriter is trying to get you to detach and basically maybe have a sort of out-of-body sort of an entertainment experience, you'll still learn from it. What the Christian producer team do is trying to draw you closer to some sort of reality. Okay? I think that there's fundamentally a difference between teaching films and entertainment films. And I know there's a lot messy on that. There's ones that cross over. But the Christian community is more interested in you going off and learning something and seeing something affirmed and true than they are about, say, detaching and seeing the ark rise up on the water and the waves come down and crash.
Sure.
That's just not what they're aiming at. And that's why we keep on making mistakes.
And what Laura's saying is true. It's about affirmation as well. Like
Yeah.
you go to see something that's affirming your faith. And the clever thing about Fireproof, just to go back quickly, was the script was quite clever as it started the breakdown of the marriage and work.
Yeah, and if I can use your pun...
it was a different romantic comedy, for want of a better word.
And if I can use your pun, and it crashed and burned, here...
it was okay.
Wow.
It's
It
pun
did
sitting
okay
here
on
today.
DVD.
At
that
that
was
point,
free,
I think
by
we
the
need
way.
to move.
And if the reason why it crashed and burned here is because, to refer back to what I'm talking about, the ghetto is too small.
Yeah.
So in fact in many Western nations it's just too small, so they can't shift it onto an international market. It just doesn't work.
We got to watch the Son of God movie the other night, and we had a discussion similar to this with the audience, and one young lady in the audience said, honestly, I would be kind of lazy. I wouldn't want to read the Bible, but I'd be interested in seeing it on the big screen. And so within that, you have a lot of people kind of getting their, if you'd like, theology or knowledge of the Bible from film. Even Evan Almighty, you kind of jokingly said that, but even with Bruce Almighty and
God's black.
Yeah, that's right. Morgan Freeman he has a
and
job.
has the
for
best
rest
lines.
of his, yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But how do you respond to that? I mean, the thing is that we live in a visual. There was even another question that was posed here. He said, "Well, do you think that if the Bible was written today, would it have been in film? It would have been a film or a YouTube clip opposed to being actually written."
The kicking soundtrack.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, so there's a lot of questions there, but I'm just kind of curious, like, where people are getting the Bible from video and from film. So what do you do? How do
I
you
don't want to
respond
name
that?
drop, but I'm going to have to name drop.
Go ahead.
Go.
Because I interviewed Diogo Morgado, who played Jesus in the
There you go.
miniseries.
He got
In
to
the
speak
Bible.
How
on
many
Jesus,
times did you
yeah.
interview him?
Only once.
Oh, it's-
And so he played Jesus in the miniseries, and then the Jesus section of the miniseries was cut into the Son of God, so just as a bit of a lead up. And he was very clear that it was a big responsibility for him because it's the first time in 10 years that Jesus had been seen on film. So it was quite a big deal for him, and it's true. It was probably the first time kids of a certain age would see Jesus portrayed in a film or on TV. So that is true in the generation, the next generation that we've been talking about, is experiencing the stories through film and TV. So, yeah.
I don't know whether or not, it's a question for university grads to try and work out whether or not the Bible inherently loses anything if it moves from print to film.
Right.
But from a script writing point of view, I can tell you that writing is very, in terms of information, text-based information, is very much about facts.
Right.
Whereas pictures are very much about emotions. So I think that they can, going on into the future, I think that they can actually sit very neatly side by side, because I can learn about something, but being told how to feel about something, or taught how to feel about something, is a very important process. And so we learn how you can read all the textbooks you like about World War II, and then you can go see Saving Private Ryan and feel about D-Day in a completely different way. And the same way it works, for Jesus. So one of the big things about the Jesus, the recent one, Son of God, is that the some of the objections would be that there weren't literal lines Jesus didn't say. The classic one is, come and I will make you fishers of men, when he talks to Peter and Peter says, what are we going to do? And he says, come, we're going to go change the world. Which from our point of view, on a Christian perspective, going, hang on a second, let me just turn that up. No, I actually think the audience would have got the feeling.
Right.
And so I feel like it's important to have films telling these stories, because we need to teach people how to feel about this topic. Because I think that there is a counter feeling argument going on in the media at the moment, which is really outweighing things. It's really quite dangerous. From that perspective, we're being taught to feel quite negatively, and I love the balance.
I think it's at least about opening the door to, I guess, showing a different kind of feeling. Because I guess I wouldn't say people need to be taught how to feel about something, because they'll explore it for themselves. But I think if they're not from any kind of Christian background, or it's a new concept for them to think about Christian text, they do need sort of something to just give a suggestion as to, hey, this is a possible interpretation, and you may have heard this context in mainstream media, but here's perhaps a Christian brainwave on what you might like to consider. And from living in a very visual generation, I think the visual aspect certainly opens the door, but it's not. I don't think it's enough to just watch the movie without the text. But I think the visual side is definitely going to be that open door, because much like year 8 English and watching your movies instead of reading your books, it helps to have a visual aid to then bring to life these things that you go back and read. And I mean, I know personally as a Christian, I watched the Noah movie, I've watched Son of God, and seeing something like that has then made me go back to my Bible and reading it. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I can kind of put picture to the words that are written and then take my own interpretation from what I then read. So it's definitely an aid, I think. But
well, look at because both of you having with Real Dialogue and also with Connect with what you do. I mean, how do you get people to the point of then reading it? I mean, because now we do. I mean, pretty much you give them a YouTube clip. How do you get somebody to the point of considering taking it from the big screen and then all of a sudden then going, oh, I really want to read it? Because I mean, they said right after the Noah film came out, like Bible Gateway, 300% increase in the number of people coming and looking at the actual text. But
YouVersion, the downloadable app, basically saw a 100% increase on those that they would normally distribute inside the year, inside of a month.
There you go.
So yeah, same thing.
So how do you do that? I mean, what is the drive? Because especially you're even talking generationally. I mean, generationally maybe.
I think the drive is what Mark was talking about before. Is we learn from other people's experiences in film a lot. There's that whole the simple act of storytelling and experiencing someone else's point of view, or walking in their shoes. That I suppose there's a great deal of empathy in that, and even going to see a film and sort of seeing some parallels, spiritual parallels in a film, for want of a better word, is good to. I believe a lot of filmmakers, because film is a collaborative process. Who's to say someone in the 1,000 people that didn't produce that film may be exposed to Christianity or something? Who's to say there's not some message in there somewhere? We often talk about the sort of overarching themes in films, be it justice or redemption or whatever. The Bible has all sorts of things to talk about that. And yeah,
if I was drawing a line between how I was actually going to look, if I say I wanted to introduce somebody who had no background, and I would find this very hard actually to find that person who had no connection with Christianity in a Western culture in Australia, because there's just going to be some rub point somewhere along the way. But look, stories, the most successful stories work on the basis of inspiring curiosity. Okay, and look, it's such a methodical process. Actually, there are 5 key methods for inspiring curiosity, and you sit there working the script and you say to yourself, which one am I going to use today? It's a Wednesday, we'll use this one. But so if you can connect curiosity with what it is that somebody is watching, then that feeling that they're having associated with it is actually going to pay off in terms of them trying to find out more. Right. Okay, so the character, Christians should wake up. The character of Christ is probably the most interesting thing going for Christianity, because he is such a figure of integrity, and yet at the same time operates so opposite to the way that we're straight away set up with this conundrum. I want to be a person of integrity, I'm not sure I could operate like that. How could this guy operate like that? It's just the sort of thing you want to connect. So any good portrayal. Now, we were talking about this before because we were thinking, oh, we'll end up talking about Jesus the whole time. But one of the interesting things is you don't have to go to Christian film to get that. So there are lots of films pervading our society that talk about the heroic, the messianic, the saviour figure, and that's just constant.
Right.
And what is admirable in them is enough to inspire curiosity in ourselves and our desire for that. And that's a bridge.
Yeah, and I think it's about making people aware of that there's a gap, like that between what is represented in Noah or any other film that identifies with the Christian text and what the actual text says, is letting people know that there is a gap there, that like what's told on film isn't necessarily the same as what's written. And like the discussion around Noah and all the backlash from every other direction was because they said this detail wasn't talked about and what's this doing in the script and et cetera, et cetera. So then people's curiosity, as you say, is inspired and they're like, what is actually the truth of it? And for me, that's why I went back to, because I mean, like I don't spend much time reading Old Testament. I hang out in like the New Testament stuff. How long ago did I read the story of the flood? And I go back to actually check my facts and go, did this happen? Is this what was said? What was the actual message? Because you have that trigger point that there's a gap. So I think it's making people aware of that gap.
And possibly even abandoning our whole... There's an entrenched or defensive attitude too. Like somehow we're supposed to be defending everything that's said, right? Inviting the questions is not a bad thing. And then engaging with the questions with people.
And also, are we just too judgmental?
Yeah.
Like, should we just kind of sit back, let that happen, be part of the conversation? So, if a co-worker or something saw the film and went, wow, that was a really wacky interpretation of Noah, you can kind of say, well, there's always the book to go back to. So, and it's the same, we were talking about the Narnia franchise before. I think that was almost killed off by massive criticism from the sort of Christian critics in the US.
Yeah, it wasn't the secular community that killed that franchise.
Yeah, it was the third film in the series didn't make enough money to cover the cost of it, and so Walden Media and Fox have gone back and thought, should we make another one? Now, to my mind, actually just seeing those stories on film was a rush, because I loved those films, and the first one did really well, and they are clear allegorical gospel films, if you want, for want of a better word.
Well, the time is up actually for us. We have about a minute left, so thank you for all the questions that were sent in. We did get to quite a few, but maybe not all. So they will. This wonderful panel.
I'll do an offer. Send me the questions.
Okay.
We'll flick it around, and maybe we might take a few each and just write a few lines.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
And then you can put that on your website, and then people don't feel like they've been cheated just because I talked to them.
Okay, that sounds great. That sounds good. Well, then we won't start with you on the last question. Yeah. No, just kidding. No, well, I guess I would kind of finish. So, do you see value in still getting the Bible story up in film and also engaging with it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and the more filmmakers that want to tackle it, the better, I think, because it's a worldwide conversation. So why not get in on it and be part of that conversation culturally?
I would say absolutely as well. Because I read an article about this just recently that was talking about films being formative liturgies that shape us into trying to be a particular kind of person. And I think if the Bible and if Christian text, if Christian belief, faith, everything isn't involved in part of that shaping experience, what a loss that would be. I think, because obviously from a Christian perspective, you're not just wanting people to absorb the Christian faith and belief, but there's also a code of morality and a code of sort of cultural expression within that lifestyle that I think is of great value. And I think for that not to be brought up on screen and not to be discussed, I think would be an absolute detriment, I think.
All
So.
right.
And just for contrast's sake, I'm going to offer a slightly different point of view, and that I'm going to say, look, okay, let's have Bible films, why not? But let's stop getting hung up on Bible films, because it's good to have them, yes. But if all Christians ever get concerned about is how well this did as a Bible film or how badly it did as a Bible film, gosh, are we just surrendering 90% of the market? I mean, get engaged in films from a spiritual perspective, because every human being has a spiritual capacity. They've got questions to ask that are spiritual questions, and they'll be asked in their context as well as ours. So more Bible films, but more engagement.
Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. That's perfect, because actually this is a perfect setup for where we're going next.
Wow.
Well, can we just say thank you to our panel for being here today?